Chapter 1. The Golden Seal. A Big Storm. Tanya cried, "Oh no!" The storm arrived, and it sounded like a big, angry animal. Unimak is the island near Alaska. It is a small, cold island and a difficult place for people. For many years, there were no people there. Then, one day, an American man and a young woman moved to the island and started living there. They shot rabbits and bears and ate them. There were salmon in the rivers too. A little boy arrived, and the family was happy. The three of them always looked for an animal, the beautiful golden seal. They looked for a golden seal every day, but they didn't see one. One late summer evening, Jim Lee walked to the beach. At this time of day, rabbits usually played in the sand dunes and there were wild birds in the sky. But this evening, the island was very quiet. There were no rabbits in the sand dunes and no birds in the sky. A big storm is coming, Jim thought. He quickly went back to his small house. There's going to be a big storm, he said to Tanya and their 8-year-old son, Eric. They closed the door and the windows and waited for the storm. Unimak's summers weren't usually hot, but that night it was very hot. Tanya was frightened. They didn't like storms. In the old stories, good things never happen during the storm. Tanya didn't sleep all night. She sat at the open door and watched the ocean. In the morning, the ocean was a dark green color. "Let's go to the river and look for salmon," Jim said. "Can I stay here, Father?" Eric asked. "I want to play." "Okay," Jim answered. "But listen, Eric, there's going to be a big storm. Stay near the house. Do you promise?" Eric promised. Hand in hand, Mother and Father went to the river. They looked for salmon all morning, but they didn't find any. Early in the afternoon, the sky went very dark. "Quick," Jim said, "let's go." Hand in hand again, Jim and Tanya started to run back home. The sky was now black. Suddenly, there was a strong wind. Behind them, the dark green water of the ocean started moving very fast. At their house, Tanya called, "Eric, Eric." But there was no answer, and Tanya was very frightened. There was a letter from Eric on the table. It said, "I'm going to the sand dunes. I want to find a golden seal. Don't be frightened. I love you, Eric." Tanya cried, "Oh no, no, no." The storm arrived, and it sounded like a big, angry animal. "Don't be frightened," Jim said to Tanya. "Eric's a good boy. Maybe he's in one of the little houses in the sand dunes." "But that's not a safe place for a small boy in a big storm," Tanya said. "Okay," Jim said. "I'm going to the sand dunes now. You stay here." He opened the door and walked out into the storm. But the wind was very strong, and it was very difficult. After a short time, he fell down. He looked up at the sand dunes. There was no Eric. Then the wind came again, and Jim stopped moving. Tanya saw this and went out into the storm. Jim was heavy, but she managed to bring him back into the house. He slowly opened his eyes and smiled a little bit. "Eric's okay," he said quietly. "I didn't see him in the dunes." Jim sat quietly on the bed and listened to the storm. Night came, and it was suddenly very cold. Tanya walked around the room. Suddenly, she stopped moving. "What's that noise?" she said. Jim listened. There was a small noise at the front door of their house. It wasn't the wind. Eric, Jim said, and moved quickly off the bed. No, Tanya said. Who was it? What was it? No, it's not Eric. Don't open the door. Jim didn't listen to her. He opened the door, and a man fell into the room. His hands were blue with cold, and his face was red with blood. He fell at Tanya's feet and didn't move. Chapter 2. The Golden Seal. What is it? Eric thought. Maybe it's a bear. He started to move to the door. He wanted to get out, but then he remembered the storm. Eric went across the river and up the sand dunes. Then he looked down at the ocean. The water was very green today, and the sky was very dark, but he didn't see that. He only wanted to see one thing, a golden seal. Suddenly, there was a lot of noise. The ocean started to move up the beach. Eric quickly stood up. He looked up at the angry black sky. Then there was a strong wind and he fell down. For a long time, Eric didn't move. He was frightened. I have a big problem, he thought. I can't run home in this storm. What can I do? I know. I can go to one of the little houses in the sand dunes. They're near here. My father put food, lights, and coats in them. This storm can't hurt me there. Eric started to walk slowly across the sand. The wind was strong, and he fell down many times. I can't stop, he thought. Then he saw a little house in front of him. Very slowly, he moved across the sand and opened the door. He went in and closed the door. The little building had no windows and it was dark. There was a strong smell, too. Eric didn't like it. There was a small noise and two little red lights moved up from the floor in front of him. Eric moved back. He was very frightened. There was an animal in there with him. What is it? Eric thought. Maybe it's a bear. He started to move to the door. He wanted to get out. But then he remembered the storm. He closed his eyes and waited. But the animal didn't move. Slowly, Eric opened his eyes again. He looked at the small red lights of the animal's eyes, and suddenly he wasn't frightened. The eyes were friendly, not the angry eyes of a bear. In the dark, Eric managed to find a light. Then he looked at the animal for a long time. It was a beautiful golden seal, and there were two small pups with her on the floor. Oh, Eric said quietly, you're beautiful, and you're pups. Do you want some food? Let's find some. He managed to find some food. He put some salmon on the floor in front of the seal and waited. The seal didn't move. She watched Eric quietly. Then, after a long time, she opened her mouth and started to eat. Night came, and it was very cold now. Eric put a big coat on the seal and her pups. Then he sat down and closed his eyes. But he couldn't go to sleep. He went to the seal and put his head on the seal's back. He closed his eyes again. Sleep wasn't a problem now. In the morning, Eric opened the door. It was very cold. He looked back at the golden seal. The storm is going away, he thought. Now my mother and father are going to look for me. My father always carries a gun with him. He often talks about golden seals. He wants to find one and shoot it. People give a lot of money for the fur of a golden seal, but he isn't going to shoot this seal. She's my friend. Eric thought about this problem for a long time. Then he found an answer. My father isn't going to find this golden seal. I'm going to find my father and talk to him first. Eric put some salmon on the floor in front of the seal. Then he looked into her eyes. "Don't be frightened," he said. "My father isn't going to shoot you. I promise." Chapter 3. The Promise. "I'm going to swim across the river," Jim answered. "No, Jim," Tanya said. "Don't do it." From the boat, Howard Crawford saw the golden seal in the ocean near the island. The seal was very fat. "She's going to have pups," he thought. "She wants to find a quiet place on the island, so bears and men with guns can't find her. But I'm going to catch her. I want to sell her fur." He went after her in his small boat. But the golden seal moved quickly, and his boat was slow. Suddenly, the sky went very dark. "There's going to be a storm," a man on the big boat behind him said. "Come back." But Crawford didn't listen. He wanted to catch the golden seal. Suddenly, there was a strong wind, and Crawford fell into the water. But he was a strong swimmer. He managed to swim to the beach. The storm was very bad now, and Crawford was frightened. Then he saw the lights of a small house. "I can't move in this storm," he thought, "but I'm going to try." He was moving slowly. There was sand in his eyes and mouth, but he didn't stop moving. After a long time, he arrived at the small house. He managed to stand up. Then he put his hands on the door. The door opened, and he saw two people in front of him, 50-year-old man and a young woman with frightened eyes. Then the room went dark, and he fell on the floor at the woman's feet. Jim closed the door, and he and Tanya put Crawford on the bed. "He is a seal hunter," Jim said. Tanya didn't answer. She looked at the man on the bed. She wasn't frightened now. The man was young, and he had dark hair. She washed the blood and sand from his eyes and mouth. A short time later, Crawford opened his eyes and looked up at her. "He's opening his eyes," Tanya called. Jim went to the bed, but Crawford didn't want to talk. The young man closed his eyes again. He wanted to think. "Maybe this man knows about the golden seal," he thought. "Maybe he wants to catch her too. But I want to find her first." Jim and Tanya sat down and talked quietly about their son. Crawford waited. Then he slowly put his hand into his coat. "Good," he thought with a smile. "The gun's here." He stayed quietly on the bed. He didn't want to close his eyes, but it was difficult. In the morning, Crawford opened his eyes. He looked up and saw Jim and Tanya in big fur coats. "Are you okay?" Tanya asked him. "Yes," Crawford said. "But where are you two going?" "We're going to find our son. He was out in the storm yesterday, and he didn't come back." "No," Crawford thought. "They know about the golden seal. They're going to look for her." "I want to come with you," he said. Jim and Tanya didn't want to go with him. "Stay in bed," they said. "You're sick." But he didn't listen. The two men and the woman walked out into the cold. A short time later, they arrived at the river and stopped. Before the storm, the river was quiet, but now, after the storm, the river moved very quickly with a lot of noise. Suddenly, across the river, a small boy came down from the sand dunes. "Look," Jim called. "Eric," Tanya said with a big smile. Eric jumped up and down and called to his mother and father, but Jim, Tanya, and Crawford didn't hear him because of the noise of the river. Crawford looked at the strong river. "What are you going to do?" he asked Jim and Tanya. "I'm going to swim across the river," Jim answered. No, Jim, Tanya said. Don't do it. You're not strong. You can't. No, I'm going to swim across it, Crawford thought. Then they're going to be very happy. And happy fathers don't think about golden seals. I'm going, he said. Crawford went into the river. The water moved very quickly, but he was a strong swimmer. He arrived with no problem and said to Eric, "Hi, young man, my name's Howard. I'm going to take you back across the river to your mother and father." Eric was frightened. "Why didn't my father come?" he asked. "Your father isn't strong because of the storm yesterday." Eric saw the blood on Crawford's face. "Did something happen to you during the storm yesterday?" "Yes, but your mother and father were very good to me." Eric wasn't frightened now because the man was very friendly. "I had an interesting time in the storm," he said. "What did you do?" "It's a secret. Did you find a bag of money?" Eric smiled. "No, you're wrong." "Did you play in the sand?" "Wrong again." Maybe he managed to find the golden seal, Crawford suddenly thought. "No, how can a small boy find a golden seal?" "Let's go," he said. "I'm going to take you back." "Aren't you going to ask me about my secret?" Eric asked. "Later," Crawford said. "Now get on my back." Eric was heavy and the water was cold. But Crawford was very strong. A short time later, Eric was with his mother and father. "Thank you," Jim and Tanya said to Howard Crawford. "You're a good man." Slowly, they all walked home. Eric talked quietly to his father. "Father, please make a promise," he said. Jim was angry. "Why?" he asked. "You promised to stay near the house, but you didn't." "I'm sorry, Father. I'm not going to do that again." "Good," Jim said, "because promises are very important." They walked quietly for a short time, and then Eric said, "I'm a bad boy, I know, but please make a promise. I have a secret." "What is your secret?" "I have a new friend. I stayed with her in the storm. She can be your friend too, but you can't take her from me. Promise, please." "Okay, I promise. Who's your new friend?" "She's beautiful. Her fur is golden." Eric talked very quickly. "She has two beautiful little pups, and she's mine. She's going to stay with me." Jim suddenly stopped walking. He looked down at his son. "Say that again, slowly," he said. "She's a golden seal, Father, and she's my friend." "Oh no," Jim thought. "I always wanted to catch a golden seal. I want to sell her fur. How can I promise to be her friend?" "Listen to me, Eric," he said. "A golden seal isn't a friendly animal. It's big and strong. She can never be your friend. I'm sorry, son." Eric didn't talk for a long time. Then he said, "Okay, Father, maybe she can't be my friend, but you can't shoot her. You promised." "Okay," Jim said slowly, "but this seal is our secret, yours, mine, and Mother's. Do you understand?" "Can't I talk to Howard about it?" Eric asked. "No, you can't talk to Howard," Jim answered. The bear. Suddenly, the sun came out and Jim saw the bear. It was very near them. Jim didn't make a noise. Jim, Tanya, and Eric sat down at the table to eat some food, but Crawford didn't want to eat any food. "I'm going for a walk," he said. He walked to the beach and the family watched him from the window. "I don't understand," Tanya said. "What's he looking for?" Jim talked to her about Eric and the golden seal. "Howard's a seal hunter," he said. "He saw the golden seal before the storm. Now he wants to find it." "How can we stop him?" Tanya said. "The seal was in one of the little houses in the sand dunes," Eric said. "Howard doesn't know that. We can find her first." They took some food for the golden seal, and Jim and Eric went to the little house in the sand dunes. "Let's be quick, Father," Eric said. "Run." Jim had his gun in his hands. "Listen, Eric," he said. This golden seal knows you, but she doesn't know me. She's not my friend. Slowly, quietly, Eric opened the door of the little house, but the golden seal was not there. Maybe there was no golden seal here yesterday, Jim thought. Then he saw some fur on the floor of the little house. He thought. Maybe Crawford managed to find her before us, but I didn't hear the noise of a gun. And Crawford was on the beach, not on the sand dunes. Where is she, father? Eric asked. Maybe she's on the beach, his father answered. They looked for her all afternoon, but they didn't find her. Eric sat down quietly in the sand. Oh, father, where is she? Did you go back into the ocean? She can't go back with two young pups, Jim answered. They didn't talk for a long time. Then suddenly, Eric stood up. I know a place with water in the sand dunes. Maybe she went there. Okay, Jim said. Let's look there. Eric arrived at the place first. Suddenly, he stopped. There was the golden seal near the water. She was frightened of the noise. She moved away into the water with her pups behind her. Eric sat down in the sand. Don't be frightened, he said to her quietly. It's only me. Jim was behind him. He had his gun in his hand now. Don't go near her, he said. She's an animal, and she's with her pups. It's okay. She knows me. Eric put some salmon in the water for the seal. The seal moved quickly, and then she ate the salmon. Eric was happy. Come here, he called. I have a lot of salmon for you. This time, he didn't put the food in the water. He had the salmon in his hand. The golden seal came to him and opened her mouth to eat the salmon. I can shoot the golden seal now, Jim thought. Then I can take the fur into town and sell it for a lot of money. But what can I say to Eric? I can say I was frightened for him. But then Jim saw the big smile on his son's face, and he put his gun back in his coat. I promised my son, Jim thought. I can never, never, never shoot that seal. The bear was old. He had a bad leg, and his eyes weren't good. But he was strong and he wanted food. There weren't any rabbits because they were all in their homes under the sand. They were frightened of the storm, but the bear smelled the man and boy. He walked quietly to the water and waited behind a sand dune. Suddenly, the sun came out, and Jim saw the bear. It was very near them. His gun was in his hand. Jim didn't make a noise. He took Eric's hand and slowly started to take him away from the sand dune. The bear didn't see them, but he managed to hear and smell them. He walked down the sand dune after them and onto the beach. On the beach, Jim and Eric waited quietly. They didn't move. The bear didn't see them or hear them, and now he didn't smell them because of the strong smell of the ocean. After a long time, the bear made an angry noise and moved away. Jim and Eric smiled and moved away too. Then, suddenly, there was the noise of a gun. Tanya, mother! They started to run home. They had the same picture in their heads. The bear, its mouth red with blood, and Tanya on the floor. But then they saw Tanya with a gun in her hand near the front door of the house. She was okay, and there was no bear near her. Is the bear dead? Jim asked Tanya. No, he ran away, frightened. In the house, they talked about the storm, the golden seal, Howard Crawford, and the bear. Then, after they drank hot tea, Eric sat in the evening sunlight and looked at the ocean. Suddenly, he looked up at the sand dunes and saw Crawford. He's coming back here, Eric thought. What does he want now? Chapter 5 A Little Boy's Game. And you promise not to shoot her. I promise. Crawford smiled. Crawford looked for the golden seal on the beach in the sand dunes, but he didn't find it. He was angry. Then there was the noise of a gun. Oh no, he thought. The man and his wife found the golden seal before me. But then he smiled. It's not important, he thought. Maybe they managed to find the seal first. But I can take the seal's fur. He walked slowly back to the small house and saw the boy near the front door. Crawford smiled at him. Hi, young man, he said. How are you? Okay, the boy answered. Crawford sat down near him and Jim came out of the house. Bedtime, Eric, Jim said. Not now, father, Eric answered. Please. Jim looked at Crawford. I don't want my son to be near the seal hunter, he thought. But maybe Crawford only wants to be friendly. Okay, he said to Eric. You can stay here with Howard for a short time. Then he went back into the house, but he didn't close the door. Do you remember yesterday? Crawford asked Eric. You had an interesting time in the storm, but you did not say why. I know your secret now. Eric smiled. What is it? Crawford put his hands on his eyes. I'm closing my eyes, he said. In my head, I can see a picture of an animal, a big animal with a lot of golden fur. And she has 2 or 3 pups with her. She has 2, Eric said. But what is she? Crawford moved his hands away from his eyes and looked at Eric. She's a golden seal, am I right? Yes, Eric said, with a big smile. He liked this game. Where is the golden seal now? Crawford asked, with a big friendly smile on his face. The smile went from Eric's face. He didn't answer. He suddenly remembered his promise to his father. The seal was a secret. Where did you put the fur? Crawford wanted to know. Her fur? But she's not dead. Your father didn't shoot her? Crawford said, secretly happy. Yes, Eric said slowly. He promised not to shoot her because she's my friend. Okay, I promise not to shoot her, too. Now, are you going to take me to her? Eric looked at Crawford with big, frightened eyes. Why do you want to see her? He asked. The seal hunter smiled. In my years on the ocean, I never saw a golden seal. They're beautiful, I know, but I didn't even see a single one. You only want to look at her? Yes, and you promise not to shoot her? I promise, Crawford smiled. But this promise isn't important, he thought. It's only a little boy's game. Eric was happy with the seal hunter's promise and walked away from the house. Look, he said to Crawford. Crawford moved near the boy and looked up at the dunes. There's a secret place with water in the sand dunes, Eric said. Only I know about it. I can't go there now because it's my bedtime, but tomorrow I'm going to take you there. Then you're going to see your first golden seal. Chapter 6. Back to the ocean. Are they dead? Tanya asked quietly. Yes, Jim answered. That night, Howard Crawford didn't sleep. He didn't want to wait for the morning. He wanted to find the secret place and the golden seal now. He got up very slowly from the bed and made no noise. I'm going to take Jim's gun, he thought. My gun's very small. His big gun is better for this job. With Jim's gun, he quietly went out of the house and into the sand dunes. After the storm, the island was quiet and beautiful, but that wasn't important to Crawford. He only wanted to find the golden seal. After a short time, he arrived at the water. There he saw a beautiful yellow light. It was the golden seal. Behind her, her 2 pups played in the water too. Crawford moved quietly with the gun in his hand. Now, he thought, I can shoot the seal, and that beautiful golden fur is mine. Behind him, there was a small noise. Crawford was suddenly frightened. He looked back, but it was only a white rabbit. Crawford looked at the seal again. He aimed at the golden seal. Now, he thought, goodbye, golden seal. He didn't see the big black animal behind him in the sand, but he did hear a noise of a big, angry bear. Crawford moved his gun quickly and shot at the bear, but the bear was on him. A loud, frightened noise came out of Crawford's mouth. He saw the bear's big, open mouth near his face. He put up his hands, but the bear was too strong. One of Crawford's hands went into the bear's mouth, and there was blood, a lot of blood. Crawford's blood. But Crawford was strong too. He wanted to leave. He put one hand in his coat. Where's my small gun? He thought. Oh no, it's not here. But what's this? Yes, it's a knife. He managed to take the knife from his coat. Crawford's face was now in the bear's mouth, but at the same time his knife was in the bear's head. The bear fell back dead, but Crawford was dead too. The white sand was black with their blood. In the early morning light, Jim, Tanya, and Eric looked down at the bear and the seal hunter. Are they dead? Tanya asked quietly. Yes, Jim answered. They put the seal hunter in the sand. Then they started to walk back to the house. The seal wasn't in the water, Eric said. Did Howard shoot her? No, Jim answered. I didn't see a dead seal near him. Is she here on the island? Jim started to answer, but suddenly he saw Galton Seal on the beach. Look, he said. They watched the seal and her two pups. She moved slowly to the ocean, and her pups went after her. They went into the water and started to swim away. Suddenly, in the water, they moved quickly and beautifully. They watched them for a long time. The seals now looked very small in the ocean. Tanya looked at Jim and moved near him. Are you very sad? She asked him. You always wanted to catch Golden Seal. She was here on the island, but now she's in the ocean. Now you can never sell her golden fur for money. Jim smiled and took her hands. No, I'm happy. The money isn't important. I have a happy family. That's important. He looked at his son. And you? He asked. The seal was your friend. Now she isn't here. Eric thought about the night in the little house with the seal and her pups. He remembered sleeping with his head on her golden fur and her beautiful friendly eyes. But their homes were not the same. He liked living in a small house on an island. She liked living in the ocean.